loud. Okay, so we are recording now.
Okay. So you might
So we can go ahead and get started.
You might want to do a bit of editing after this.
Okay.
But yeah, no, thank you so much, Alicia, for letting me Q&A you, interview you and have a chat. So if anybody doesn't know, Alicia Wolf is the founder and author of the amazing Dizzy Cook. Ta-da!
Oh, you have it.
Yeah, lovely picture on the back. My mum says you've got beautiful hair, by the way, and you're very pretty.
Thank you.
And incredible, I have to be honest, I haven't cooked much from it because I just haven't had time, but there's a lot of recipes in there that I am very interested in. In fact, I've marked one that I'm doing tomorrow, which is the, oh, where's it gone? It's the nut balls, not the nut balls, but the protein sunflower nut balls.
Those are perfect. Yeah.
So for those who don't know you too well, but I'm sure tons of people know you across the world, just explain what, I mean, I know obviously what the Dizzy Cook's all about, but just explain in a short sentence, I suppose, as much as you can, you know, what it's all about, really.
Sure. Well, it's a little bit of a combination. You know, when I was originally starting to figure out a plan for my vestibular migraine after I was diagnosed, you know, I was looking for anything natural that I could do because I was expecting to hopefully get pregnant in the near future. So with all of that, I was looking into a lot of different diet options, and that's kind of where a migraine elimination diet came into play. So it was really a combination of getting into cooking a little bit more. I've always loved to cook. It's always been a huge part of my life.
Good at it.
Yeah, thank you so much. But it was, you know, in all that time, I kind of actually lost my job and my career to vestibular migraine. So I was looking to kind of pivot into a new area, and cooking was really something that saved me. So I started getting really into just developing my own recipes and it getting a lot of joy from that. And I realized there weren't a lot of resources for people on this kind of diet. So I wanted to translate that into, I kept going to the food blogs I used to love, and I would get so frustrated that I would have to edit so much. And with our brains, you know, sometimes we just don't want to think about all the edits we need to make and stuff like that. You want someone to tell you what to do. So I was like, well, you know, what if someone could sit here and tell someone what to do, but make it a fun food blog? So that's kind of how I got into the Dizzy Cook. And I just, I think at the time, like really only you and Kayla and maybe one or two other ambassadors. David was around too. VEDA was I felt like super small with ambassadors, especially for vestibular migraine. So I just kind of wanted to share my story to healing and the things I was finding. And I ended up with a great neurologist here who is one of very few who specializes in vestibular migraine. So just sharing my treatments with, now he's becoming like more of a household name with Dr. Bay now that he's written his book.
You're like,
and everything.
He was mine.
Yeah.
Hands off.
That's it. I mean, back then he was very hard to get into as well, but now even more so. So it's so just kind of sharing our journey together as a patient neurologist relationship as well. So I kind of put that all into one place, which, you know, kind of grew after a while.
And it's fantastic. It's really simple to understand, really. You've mapped it out really simplistically. You've got tables on your website. Yeah. You see that very well. But on Alicia's website, thedizzycook.com, have I got that right?
Yes.
There's a lot of graphs and imagery, actually, and a lot of you know, tables to make it understood really easily, which I think is really good for migraine sufferers and vestibular. Let's not forget vestibular sufferers as a general whole, because people with Meniere's, people with lots of vestibular conditions can benefit from this diet.
Exactly, because if you're making stuff at home, like stocks and broths, like normally, you go to the grocery store and it's filled with sodium.
Yeah.
And so if you're making this stuff at home, you can really adjust to what your needs are. And so that's really great for all kinds of vestibular disorders, especially if you have to limit that.
Yeah, exactly. And I read, obviously knew your story quite well, but actually I delved into it a little bit deeper because I've been chatting to you as well. But you can't remember the name of the condition, but you were misdiagnosed back
yes. Multiple times, actually. The scariest one was called probably paralimb fistula, which is a vestibular disorder that I know some people have. The part of it that was really concerning was they had told me that I would need surgery and I would go deaf in that year. So at that point was when I just decided I have to find a new doctor. This was after seeing multiple doctors and ENTs and everything like that. Yeah, and they just couldn't figure it out. So they were just throwing out these diagnoses, like different diagnoses at me. And I was just like, once I heard that one, I was like, okay, I'm not just going to get a surgery. Like, I'm going to get a second opinion on this.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lesson to be learned there. And I think that's an inspirational lesson that you can share, and by sharing and doing this book and becoming the forefront of people with vestibular, like a warrior basically. And I think people can learn that if it doesn't sit right, go and get a second opinion, a third opinion. It's
yes.
I think we all know our bodies and we all know how we feel, but a lot of people just take that first diagnosis and go, oh, well, that's it.
Yeah.
How am I gonna? That's it. I've got to have surgery. Go on to have surgery, and just unimaginable.
Right. And I think, a lot of it depends on like the expertise of your doctor and how much you trust them too. I could tell from just working with these people that they weren't super confident in what was going on. And if they're not super confident in how to diagnose you and everything, it's hard to believe in that too. So I do think some people spend a lot of time jumping from doctor to doctor, and that's also not good, because if you're just looking for someone to tell you what you want to hear, you can get into a bad path with that as well. But then on the flip side, it's like, where do you draw that line? So I don't know, maybe it's a gut feeling when you.
Yeah, I think it certainly was with me, actually. I saw neurologists, audiologists, I saw ENTs, I saw GPs, everyone under the sun, really, immunologists, allergists. I mean, everyone with a gist at the end.
A gist.
You didn't get the gist. And it's really difficult to explain all these symptoms unless a doctor or consultant has experienced any of these symptoms. I can understand why it's so difficult to diagnose. I mean, it took 2 years for me to get a VM diagnosis 11 years ago. Then I went on, unfortunately, to get vestibular neuritis from labyrinthitis, and then went on to have triple PD because I'd had vestibular migraine for so long.
For so long, But that was my issue as well. You just, like, if no one can diagnose you, or you can't get treatment, it's like you end up having this it goes for so long without treatment, and then it kind of snowballs on itself too.
That's right. Yeah. And I think people are like a pinball machine, and they go, to all of these different and get different diagnoses, and then they're so confused, and then the anxiety peaks so high that they're actually causing vertigo, and they're causing dizziness, and they're causing headaches, and tension headaches, and accentuating all of the symptoms you've already got. So it becomes, a real mess. So I think what we can do as ambassadors is say to people, the gut feeling is a really, really important thing. And I think it's something that if you don't feel it's quite right, and just go and get a second opinion. They might say it again, but you know, I think it's a really good thing to share.
I mean, I'm sure you thought this too. I don't know if you have head pain with your migraine attacks, but I didn't. And so when I went to the Mayo, we drove 16 hours to see this doctor, and which is commitment, you know, but I was desperate. And when he said migraine, I was like, oh my gosh, not another diagnosis that I don't believe in. Like, how can I have migraine without the head pain? And so he started to explain it. And then it was by some miracle, Dr. Bay had an opening in his schedule just the week after I was on his wait list. He had like a 6-month wait, and saw him, and he went through all my symptoms, and he also agreed with migraine. So that's when I kind of had the confidence, like, okay, maybe this is the accurate diagnosis I've been searching for, and this is something new, and they're just sort of figuring out that you can't have migraine attacks without that head pain
that's
so
right. And I think that's again where we can help with you know, not just ambassadors, but people who suffer, who are in social media, to share their story, is to help the awareness that you don't have to have the typical headaches. I do have severe headache,
head pain with you,
because mine was hormonal. So I get I've got one at the, that's why I'm having an attack at the moment, because of hormones, and I can tell the type of headache is just a sharp, horrible, you know, not feeling great headache. But yeah, a lot of people I speak to don't have the headache, and that's when they say, "Oh, you've got vestibular migraine." You're like, well, I don't have a headache." So yeah, it is that education side of what. So yeah, and how have you felt? Well, we'll go on to some of my members actually have asked some questions.
Okay.
That's all right. But just I've got a few questions for you before we go into that. How have you felt in pregnancy with your VM?
Actually really good. I've been very lucky to not have too many bad days. I'm not as hormonally triggered, I think, which I do think helps during pregnancy. I will say my first trimester was probably my hardest, and that was
when the
because
hormones are really building up and ramping.
Yes. And then on top of that, so we did IVF, so I was also injecting progesterone and taking estrogen to help support the pregnancy. And so I think adding that into it's like you even need more hormones than you already
you speak about in your story about going through that IVF journey and finding medications that actually are okay to have as a migraine sufferer, because that's another ball game.
Yes. And that just takes a lot of like close work with your OB and your reproductive endocrinologist and your neuro. Actually, so right now my Dr. Bay is working with my OB to kind of connect on what we can do to get me on a plan after I give birth. So we have a few options just in preparation in case, you know, because things seem to go haywire after. You hear of a lot of people having issues after too. So
that's unfortunately what happened to me, but mine are from hormone trigger, but I was just very unlucky that because I had twins, apparently the hormones have to go that much higher.
Okay, interesting.
Pregnancy. Apparently, this is what my original consultant said to me when he diagnosed me. You know, and I suppose it's double the work, double the you know, it's got to go double higher apparently. So it for some reason had some reaction because you know, I was absolutely fine before that. I never had a headache in my life. I never took Anadin. I never had dizziness. I never had anxiety. I never had sinking vertigo. Nothing. None of these nerve pains. Nothing. You know, I was clear of anything really before that's, you know, and I will remind them when they're 18 years old what I've been through to have you. So
Oh my gosh.
so yes, it's interesting, and I'm sure you'll be fine, and you will liaise with your consultant and OB to balance those things after you give birth.
Yeah, I mean, we're just trying to get ahead of it. And the
Yeah.
good news is, like, I know what has worked for me in the past, and we're preparing, and we're not going into it like totally blind. I think a lot of people are blindsided when it happens. And it's the same thing. I was blindsided 4 or 5 years ago by it. So
Mm,
I think just prepping for it and doing all that we can will be helpful. And I've been able to sort of prep for it throughout
that's a good
pregnancy.
idea.
Like, magnesium has been wonderful for me. Trying to stay with the diet as best I could.
Yeah.
I found that my symptoms really spiked because of like dehydration and then also anxiety. So I had a lot of anxiety my first trimester because we've been through a lot of pregnancy loss, and
Right.
I had a
Mm,
hematoma, so I was bleeding, and so there was just a lot going on. So I think that anxiety combined with being so sick, I was dehydrated, and so it was just trying to manage through that. And I think that's why my attacks got just a little bit worse during that time. But like, I noticed, something, if you can get your OBs to approve, and I'm not sure how this is where you are too, but I did some at home IVs if I would get super dehydrated. One time I had to actually go into the hospital, but you can order people to come to your house, and they'll just set you up with a quick IV, and
oh,
that
that's
seemed to
great.
really help.
Yeah,
Um,
because I think it is quite easy to get dehydrated when you've got a life that you're giving everything to inside. So
right.
you kind of often forget you have to drink double, you have to have 500 extra
Right.
calories and what have you. So, and how have you found it in lockdown, going through pregnancy, having vestibular migraine, and you know everything that you have to do?
um, yeah, it's been hard, because like, this is our first pregnancy and everything. It's been hard because my husband hasn't been able to come to any of the appointments.
That's yeah.
So it's hard for him to not like see our first
Oh.
child and stuff like that. But
Have they given you
you know,
CDs, videos of?
no, they actually don't allow recordings because it's like a legal issue. So sometimes,
Goodness.
like, I'll do FaceTime, but then he can't really see. So actually, the only time he's been able to see an ultrasound was when I got admitted to the hospital because my dehydration was so bad.
Mm,
So I guess that was like the silver lining of having to do that.
yeah.
But yeah, that's been hard. It's been hard not to celebrate with like friends and family as much. It just feels like you're sort of going through the motions on it. But as far as, migraine treatment and just treatment, just going through pregnancy and everything like that, it's been good because, I have been able to meet with my neurologist on video instead of
Mm,
having to go in for appointments. So they're doing more teleconferencing and stuff like that. All my OB appointments have been in person, but
mm.
in the US, I'm really happy they're doing that because, if you're having like a super dizzy day
Yeah,
or
it
you're
makes it
just
a
not
lot easier.
feeling well,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so much easier to do something like this and
Yeah. What's
talk.
quite funny is I've actually been signed off, fingers crossed for forever, hopefully, from my audiologist, vestibular migraine specialist,
Okay.
which is great news. I was like, toddly ho. But
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm going to keep in contact with him because there is
Yeah.
plans to work in the hospital. He wants me to support
Okay.
some of the patients, which is very exciting. So I've been approved for all that, but it's COVID happened.
Yeah.
Um, but a couple of times in lockdown, I had a couple of gynecologist video appointments come through, and I was like, how's that going to work?
I don't know how that works. I've had to go in person for all of mine, so
Yeah, and
I can't help you
yeah,
on
right.
that.
And luckily, actually, they made a mistake, and it was just a phone call. I was like, God. So anyway, on the light-hearted side. So
actually, I should give a shout out to the ladies at Balancing Act Rehab. I did a video with them not too long ago, and they're doing some online vestibular therapy as well in certain states. So if people need that kind of help,
and what are they called? Sorry, if you say what they're called.
Balancing Act Rehab.
Okay.
It's Danielle Tate and Abby Ross, and they work for VEDA. I'm sure you can find their information on vestibular.org, but they're affiliated. They did the conference that we did, and
the migraine.
So if any of your US readers want to,
I'm sure,
or need that, I know not everyone's doing therapy online, but they are in a few states.
I think everybody's getting slicker at it, and it's a done thing now, which is great, because there's a lot of people that I have in my members group that are housebound, and that they can't go out to when COVID's not a thing anymore, hopefully, but they can't go out, or some are agoraphobic, and it's this Zoom thing is something for everybody to get used to, unfortunately. But, in some positives, it's a good thing for people that are housebound and can't physically get out. So I'll, if it's all right with you, I'll get onto some questions.
Okay, sure.
I have also, as the questions go through, there are a few things. I've got some props here.
Okay. So, perfect.
These are all the things that obviously I take and have, and supplements and things, but so the first one is an interesting one. It's about chocolate. So can I still eat chocolate, and I really can't come without chocolate in my life?
Well, you know what, if it doesn't bother you, like, I've reintroduced chocolate as well, so if it doesn't I mean, I can't go crazy on it, if I'm having if there's a lot of triggers around, if there's leather and other stuff like that, but a little bit here and there is
so
fine.
In moderation is fine. What kind of chocolate have you reintroduced? Is it dark chocolate or milk chocolate, or
all kinds? I tend to do better with milk chocolate than dark chocolate. I don't know why that is, but I think that's part of the elimination diet too, is if you find things don't bother you, eventually, once you get control of your once you're not 24/7 symptomatic anymore, definitely people should be introducing stuff like this, especially the stuff they miss the most. So
actually, very very interesting you say once you're sort of not 24/7 with it, to introduce things a little bit more, because 4 years ago I went on a more of a clean, nutritious eating diet. You probably see from my blog and everything, but I started introducing cacao a lot more. The cacao raw powder.
The powder.
That one. And actually, in a way, at the beginning, I did it little bits in smoothies and built up the tolerance of it. And over time, my body just craves it and loves it. And it's fine because it's got no refined sugar in it. And that's the trigger for me, is refined sugar. And I seem to get on quite well with that. But a lot of people can't tolerate it because they're very symptomatic at the moment. So it's interesting.
It just depends. But smoothies are great. I love it with I'll add a little bit of in like a cherry smoothie. So like you get like a chocolate cherry smoothie. It's really good.
I don't do cherry flavor. Write it down.
I have a cherry vanilla.
Like real cherries?
Yeah, real cherries. I'll send it to you. It's like frozen. You can just get the frozen cherries and add like a little. I think it's online. I'll send you the link to it.
Okay. I'm sure I saw a cherry covered smoothie in
here. It's a vanilla cherry smoothie, but if you add like a little bit of your cacao powder, it's really delicious.
That would be fantastic. So the next one is a real, a lot of people contacting me about alcohol.
Okay.
So it
Especially around the holidays, I'm sure.
Probably. And lockdown as well, because the UK is in lockdown. So I'm getting a lot of people saying, can I drink a load of alcohol? This person says they do like it on occasion, like a glass of champagne. I know lots of people that have Prosecco and red wine and white wine and, gin and tonic, and they're all fine with it. So I think, again, like the chocolate, is it kind of what triggers you, what you try it, that kind of thing. See if you're like it.
I mean, with alcohol, it tends to be a little more, you can draw more parallels to it. Like there are some things that tend to be more well tolerated than others. So like the clear liquors, people tend to tolerate a little bit better. I think that people tend to do better with like dry white wines instead of champagne. And often this can have to do with a number of things, like certain like very sweet white wines like Moscato have a lot more sulfites in them than,
I can't tolerate sulfites at all, because I'm alcohol free as of 8 years, but I have some non-alcoholic champagne or Prosecco, and it's got sulfites in it. It gives me an awful headache.
It's, even though there's no alcohol in it, it still has those. And then like with reds, if people can't tolerate reds, it could be, anything from, usually it's histamine based, but it could be like tannins or something like that too. So there are certain, I find the two best wines that are tolerated are, dry white wines, so Sauvignon Blanc and, like stainless steel barrel Chardonnays or something like that. And then Pinot Noirs. It's important to get them from really good wineries, because a lot of people blame sulfites sometimes or histamines, and it can actually be like additives and flavorings that some of these mass wineries are putting into their wine to make them taste the same year after year. So I think that's why sometimes people say they do better with European wines, because European wines tend to add fewer flavor, they go with what the grape gives them, versus American wines, which like these mass produced wines like Kendall Jackson or whatever, that have to taste the same every year. So just stuff like that. It does take some experimenting. In the US, and I think you can get these over there too, we have these wine wands. They will not only remove the sulfites, so like those drops do, except for they don't add anything to your wine or champagne.
That's what you have on your website, and it's got a metal thing inside.
So
that gets rid of the sulfites, does it?
It gets rid of the sulfites, and it also gets rid of like the biogenic amines. So it'll get rid of like tyramine and histamine.
Wow.
And so, that's what kind of makes it different from like, you'll see like the Ulo vent ones, and you'll see like the drops that remove sulfites, but this actually removes like almost everything that can cause.
Wow, that's incredible.
Except for those additives and flavorings. It doesn't remove those. But so a lot of people do well with those.
Maybe I'll start drinking again.
No,
I think after 8 years I've got used to it. I've totally got used to it. My no drinking came straight after an incident I had on a motorway, unfortunately. I'd been on a hen do the night before, and I was fine to drive. I'd left it to the early evening the next day, and I'd eaten fine, but that's when I started having an issue when I was driving, with a panic and a dizzy attack and a vertigo attack at the same time, when I was on my own. And ever since then, I haven't drunk, but my consultant actually advised me to maybe not drink. So I just thought, well, I'll give it a go, and then it stuck with me. So, but I'm fine with that. I've got used to it now. But I used to like a drink. The world's a safer place, Alicia, for me not drinking. I had a enough as it is sober. Can you imagine?
Oh my God.
And that's really, really interesting information on the alcohol. And so the next, going from alcohol to something very healthy, which is fruit and vegetables.
Yes.
One of my members have asked, are there any specific fruit and vegetables that are more preventative? So are they really good for preventing migraines? That's an interesting question.
It is that. I mean, that is really interesting. I don't think there's been a lot of evidence on that, except for like you could, with magnesium. I mean, magnesium has been shown to be an effective migraine preventative. So focusing on foods that are higher in magnesium, so like green leafy vegetables and stuff like that, can be helpful. But
what's the highest? What do you know? What the highest vegetable is in magnesium?
I really don't actually. I know nuts are pretty high, but they ended up being one of my triggers. So I just know that if you that would be an interesting thing to look up.
I'll Google that one.
I know chocolate does have magnesium. Dark chocolate has magnesium in it too, if people can tolerate that. So it kind of can be a catch-22.
I just wonder. You see here, look, cacao, magnesium, 572 milligrams per 100. That's
yeah. So
no wonder I'm good on that. so yeah, that's interesting, because I didn't really realize that magnesium was in some foods, but certainly not chocolate, actually.
Yeah, even like B vitamins, like you can get it from certain foods and stuff. So I think that's where like eating more vegetables and fruits and stuff like that is really helpful. That's kind of the hard part.
With the magnesium high vegetables and fruits, and maybe if you can tolerate cacao, but with those types of things, they're very sort of cognitive behavioral benefits, aren't they? They're cognitively beneficial because of the magnesium, helps with anxiety and depression and things like that, as well as as migraine symptoms, apparently.
Right. And then you're sort of getting it throughout the day versus just like taking a supplement and stuff like that. It's gradually absorbed. So that's the good part about incorporating it into food. If you can remember to do that. But I also think that's why people just feel better in general when they're eating additive free, you know.
That's really okay. So what I'll do is after this, I'll Google and see if I can get a list of high magnesium fruit and veg and put it on the video. The next one is about obviously this is a processed food, McDonald's takeaways.
McDonald's. So actually, I think people think McDonald's is worse than they are.
They've had a bad name, haven't they?
They do. I mean, there are some things that are very processed there, but overall, their burger, like just their plain burger, it is decent. They don't add anything to their meat. So I actually have a post on the dizzycook.com about what you can eat at McDonald's, and it's really not much, but there are a few things that are okay to order there. So people can check that out too. But even just if you're in a hurry or something like that, even just like a plain burger, sometimes they'll do it protein style, so you can get it on lettuce or something. But, I know that's not as filling as like having the bun and all that. But
it's something. At least you can have something from it, which is great. And I think automatically people, when they have vestibular issues, they cut out they think it's processed, but that's really interesting because a lot of people probably miss it, and now they're thinking, oh, can have a burger. It's great.
I went through and it's different in different countries, so like I think it's probably better for you guys over there. It seems like you all use fewer additives, but for us, I went through one day like all the major fast food chains and kind of looked at who who was honest about, some of them will post their ingredients online. So for everyone who was very open on that, I read through all their ingredients and kind of put in what we can and can't have and what the issues are. So it's a really helpful post.
That's brilliant. Well,
yeah,
I'll tag that in. That's really, really helpful.
Yeah.
So going on to supplements, which I know you're pretty clued up on. We talked about magnesium. This is actually one of my questions, actually, because I used to take magnesium. And then I kind of came off all supplements so that I knew that my new medication was working. And actually I'm off medication now as of a year, but it was quite interesting. I started taking magnesium because everyone kind of was taking it, but I didn't know whether I was low on it. But I know that typically migrainous people are typically commonly low on it, possibly. So that's why I started taking it. Did you ever have a test to determine that you were low on magnesium?
So here's the thing about magnesium tests is they're just testing what is found in your blood. So it's different than what is actually getting absorbed by our brains, and you can't test the amount that is crossing that blood-brain barrier and getting absorbed by our neurological system, which is what needs it. So I see a lot of people get blood tests and their doctors say, oh, you're fine on magnesium, but it doesn't necessarily apply to people with migraine because there's no way to test what's getting absorbed. And I think Dr. Bay and I actually spoke about this in our last video together, but generally, having people with migraine take some sort of amount daily can help, and especially taking ones that cross that blood-brain barrier, like magnesium threonate. So if people are getting a lot of brain fog, they can kind of take that, and that's one that gets directly absorbed right where we need it. And so I think that's where a lot of people benefit, myself included, from having that and just having more mental clarity and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I would recommend. And
I know you've got a lot of information on your website, a whole blog and a whole page and everything of magnesium and different types, citrate and topiramate, or all of that, not topiramate.
Right. And they help for different things. Like, I mean, citrate used to bother my stomach, and now that I'm pregnant, I kind of need to be on it. So
right, yeah.
You just kind of have to switch. You can switch it up along the way. Don't necessarily because something works for me or some other person, like it may not work for you.
Have you ever taken the combination ones?
So I have taken the combination ones. The issue there is usually they don't have a good blend, or they're blending with like less expensive forms like oxide. So that's where like that digestive upset can come into play a lot of times. And I also think it makes, like you said, how you had to pare down to make sure your preventative medication was working. Like I think it's easier to take magnesium separately so you can see what's actually helping you.
Exactly. Yeah.
And what if one type isn't working, or if it's upsetting your stomach or whatever, that way you can kind of distinguish what's working and what's not.
Well, I was taking, at the time, I was taking so many different things. I literally was taking magnesium, B12, vitamin D, B2, B6, B2, ferritin, selenium, everything.
How do you know what's working? You don't.
I just slowly came off them and thought, right, I'm going to go on to nortriptyline, and I want to know if that's got all the supplements out my system. And then I went on to nortriptyline. Then I knew that is either working or not, which it did get me on the good path. And then that was the last medication. I came off very slowly, and I came off 2019, and I haven't been on one since, luckily. But now we just do it naturally now, which is great. And what's great about your Dizzy Cook is you're doing things naturally, and using food and nutrition, which I'm a real advocate for. And if you need some supplements, great, and just doing stuff a bit more naturally. But I use medication to get me on the good path, which is
same
like
here. Yeah, we both needed it.
Yeah.
And then we were able to transition off. And that's what I tell people, like, it's okay to need it in the beginning because things are really bad. And
I think people are really
sometimes it's too hard to calm.
Yeah, they're very scared of going on medication. But, you know, as I say to people, that it is like a plaster. It helps your brain give time to heal, give you time to take stock and you know, regroup and
and it's not necessarily forever. Like, you're not going to get, I think people think you get stuck on it, and it's, I think if you have that mission to eventually get off, like it's, you know, you can get there eventually one day, hopefully. But it's not the worst thing if you need it.
Exactly. And I think that I noticed that you took CoQ10 or take CoQ10.
Yes.
I hadn't taken it for a long time. I hadn't ever taken it. Purely because I was told that it would clash with what I was on at the time, which was propranolol. Certain medications. Whether that was true, I have no idea. And then I came off medication and I thought, oh, I'm off medication, so I'm going to try CoQ10. But I've got it in a spray form. And I found it was fine, but then I started getting an oily mouth. And a metallic taste in my mouth for weeks on end. And I thought, this is really strange. And so I did come off it after a 2 or 3 months because of that. And then it was fine. But maybe it's because it's spray form and not tablet.
I think so. And there's also a difference between, what I've realized is there's also a difference between CoQ10 and ubiquinol. So ubiquinol is like this more active form of CoQ10. And it was actually something that my reproductive endocrinologist recommended I switch to ubiquinol, that form. And I wasn't seeing a lot of results when I was just taking CoQ10, but when I switched to ubiquinol, and I was taking it in higher amounts, actually for to support a healthy pregnancy. So it's actually really good for like your like for women and their reproductive systems and everything like that. It
good for me
produces
then.
Better egg quality. Yes.
Oh, no, actually, I don't want any more children. I thought you meant you know, ovaries and cysts and endometriosis.
No, but it does support a healthier balance. Yes.
Right. Okay. I don't want any more children.
That was and you know, with reproductive endocrine, you know, here they are usually shoving all these hormones at you, but that was the one thing he was really supportive of. And so I actually noticed, I think it helps support my head through IVF as well. So that's something I kind of recommend. Ubiquinol, Ubiquinol.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's just basically I forget what they call it. It's I forget the term of it, but it's basically a more active form of CoQ10. So
interesting.
That's kind of what I recommend.
It's a shame because I really wanted to try it, and it actually, I put it on my hand just now. It doesn't have an oily texture at all.
That's so strange. I don't know. Maybe it was something in the product, or
have no idea. But
again, you know, and I think this is like a good term, like to not, like a lot of people say, oh, I don't tolerate magnesium at all. Well, there are so many different brands, and so many different types. And they all have ingredients too. So like you have to read the ingredients on those labels to, you know, make sure that it's not just the magnesium. It could be something in the ingredients that's bothering you. So could be, you know, the same thing there.
Because there's so many different brands, and you know, I know that Solstar's quite a good brand, and New and things like that we have in England, but and there's lots of different brands. Like I go by New You's quite good, and Holland and Barrett.
Okay, yeah, Holland and Barrett seems to have some good ones.
Yeah, they got some good ones. So yeah, you've got to be really careful what you get from Amazon, and it's,
right.
just because it's
Exactly.
Amazon doesn't mean that it's great.
Yeah.
The next question is about protein powders.
Okay.
So I just wondered what your opinion is on protein powders. I mean, I mix in my smoothies with the cacao powder and a banana.
Yeah.
I'm all right with bananas. I didn't used to be okay with bananas, but I'm all right now.
Over time.
But this is plant-based hemp protein.
Hemp. Yeah, hemp protein is great.
And I just love it. And it seems to help my headaches, my dizziness. I swear, literally 5 years ago, I went on it when I cleaned up my diet and everything, and I went gluten-free and really tried to get my inflammation down and stuff. And I just find it, if I don't have it of a week, I really do notice a difference with brain fog and things like that. So I just wondered what your opinion is on plant-based ones and maybe other protein powders.
Yeah, I have a post on it too, but I totally think that I think hemp protein is awesome. That's kind of what I use too. Chia seeds are great.
Is a lot, yeah.
Like any seed-based like any seeds that you can add to, like, again, if you can tolerate nuts would be a great addition. I'm personally very triggered by nuts, so I have to stick with seeds.
I can tolerate them to a certain point, but it's all in moderation with nuts with me.
Yes.
If I go too far with nuts, like too many almond butters and cashews, and I can really only have them once or twice a week or 2 weeks, so I've got to be careful.
So you can. Yeah, it just depends. I find actually a lot of people, I don't know if it's just because I'm sensitive to it, but I feel like I talk to a lot of people who are sensitive to nuts as well.
I know a lot of people that are sensitive to nuts, actually.
Yeah, and it makes it hard, like, because they're so healthy, so you want to incorporate
And actually, a lot of
them.
people that I speak to, I say, because on my food blog, I've got a lot of coconuts.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Like,
okay.
But you can't have nuts. And I'm like, but it's not a nut.
It's not. Yeah, I don't consider coconuts nuts either.
I think sorry, have you heard of matcha powder?
Matcha. So yeah, that's the only thing, is like it does contain some caffeine. So I'm like super sensitive to. Yeah, I'm super sensitive to caffeine. So if you're sensitive to caffeine, that's something I wouldn't recommend. The same thing goes with, like, I think collagen powder is really trendy right now. And the issue with that as well is it's really high in free glutamate. So like if you're someone who's sensitive to MSG, it can cause issues just taking that collagen powder. Because it is high in glutamate. So that's something that just to be careful of. Like, I was taking collagen powder, like looking at the ingredients thinking, oh, this is fine, and not noticing how much glutamic acid was actually in each scoop. And so I was still getting this residual daily dizziness, and I couldn't figure out like what it was about breakfast or anything. And I was just adding that to smoothies thinking, it was so healthy for me. And so that's just little things to watch out for.
Just make sure you look at the ingredients and there's no MSG and things like that could trigger. And caffeine as well. I'm really sensitive to caffeine. I came off it six years ago now, and it's amazing what contains.
I don't miss it at all.
No, I don't either. No. But no, that's really interesting with the matcha powder, because I didn't know it had. So,
and I'd love to hear like what teas. So you must do like because tea is such a huge thing over there. So that's probably hard to navigate.
I know, I like green tea, but I have to get decaf. But I don't drink too much of it because I know some decaf coffees and things can still contain traces of caffeine, which people don't get. There is something called. I'm just trying to think what it was called. It's a I thought it was a chia tea or something like that. I'm trying to think of this, the name's gone. But I have quite a lot of peppermint tea,
Yeah.
and normal decaf, normal tea, breakfast tea. But I don't actually drink a lot of teas or hot drinks like that. I'm
Okay.
water.
Okay. That's a
3.5
good way to
liters
be,
a
I
day,
guess.
and I don't want any more drink.
Yeah.
So, but I know in England we do drink a lot of tea.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I was just looking at the next question. This is interesting. Cooking, so actually physically cooking, standing up, is a trigger for this person. Any tips on how
Yeah.
to make it easier and how to get someone who dislikes cooking
Into
to
cooking.
enjoy helping in the kitchen?
There are a few tips. So like yesterday or the day before, like with pregnancy, like it's just been really hard for me, especially towards the end. It felt like how it was at the beginning of my VM diagnosis. Like I was just out of breath and I felt kind of dizzy and I just had to sit down. And so, I keep a stool in the
Yeah.
kitchen and you just sit down and you just work very methodically. And I think giving yourself extra time, like not feeling rushed or anything like that, putting on some music that you enjoy, making yourself a fun mocktail, something like that kind of gets you into more of a relaxed state to
Have you got a
start
secret
cooking.
camera in my kitchen? Because that's exactly what I
That's
do.
it. That's what you do.
I've got my stool, I've got the music.
Yeah.
I've got my smoothie. Oh.
Just
That's
making it more of an event versus like
yeah,
something you have to do, I think makes it
yeah.
a little bit more fun. I tried to think of it for myself when it would get really hard. I try to think of it as vestibular therapy.
Yeah.
So you're looking from one ingredient to the next, you're moving from one place
Of
to the other.
course. Mm.
Exactly. Like sometimes if you can pull all your ingredients out in the beginning so you have everything, so you're not running from place to place,
That's what I
that
do
can help
now. Have
too.
everything laid out. Or because
Yes.
when I get to the instructions of that, I don't want to then go to cupboards and lift
Running all over the place. Yeah, it's too
because I'm head
much.
movement
So
triggered. It's really important, and it's just a lot easier to measure them all out and have them there, so that when you go, you don't have to go back, scroll back, which is another trigger for me.
for
Um,
sure.
mm. So
Yeah.
there's another thing that I do when I cook. Is it's my time to Zoom with my parents,
Oh,
to FaceTime my parents.
that's really nice.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have a chat whilst I'm cooking, and my mum always says, "You are always cooking when you speak to us on FaceTime." And I said, "There's a reason for that, because it makes it more fun, and I'm not
You
focused on
kind of
anything else
forget,
as much."
like,
So
yeah, we'll talk to my husband's parents too sometimes while
yeah,
we're cooking too. Yeah, it makes the time go by a little bit faster.
yeah,
So
and you'll
that's
have a baby in a
multitasking at its
sling
finest, Laura.
So
Uh,
that's interesting. That's good tips but definitely a stool is a really good tip,
really
isn't it?
helpful. Yeah, yeah, and also one thing that I've noticed helps some people, particularly if you're light sensitive.
Mm.
I've had a few readers that will use an aloe lamp, so it's like green light therapy, and they'll set
Ah,
that up in their kitchen, especially now that it's getting darker earlier.
mm.
And so you don't have so many bright lights and stuff like that around you.
Yes, because
That seems,
spotlights are
yeah, yeah, that seems to be helpful for some people. So it's worth a try.
brilliant tips. Um,
Yeah.
so, have you got any tips on how to get that really savory umami taste? Is that how you say it? Umami taste into things.
Yeah.
So many off the counter products contain MSG. Obviously, they give the taste, and we can't have it. Um, um, so yes, sort of natural flavoring. So, what would you use to flavor things?
It really just depends on the dish, but that is something I struggle with
Mm.
often when recipe developing. I think that what the next best thing, and what I've been working on actually, so I've been working on a vegan ramen recipe. Yes, very good.
You saw I
But
went
it's hard
vegan.
to
Oh,
but it's hard to get that miso, like, because
yeah.
you're getting that flavor from the fermentation of the miso and everything like that. So it's hard to get that flavor. So what I tend to do often, especially with like Asian recipes that are missing that, is use a lot of seed butters.
Okay.
So especially toasted seed butters, they have a depth of flavor to them. And especially if you're in the US, there's a brand called 88 Acres, and they'll do like watermelon seed butter and pumpkin seed butter, and
Wow.
seed butters that you're not always seeing. Usually sunflower seed butter is the most popular, but um they make ones that you're not seeing everywhere, and they can have a lot of like interesting flavors to them.
Yeah, because
So
that's actually different from then always using nut butters, which is a trigger for a lot of people.
yeah,
Actually having seeds,
yeah.
which would be a bit more tolerated.
Yeah, and they provide their own really interesting flavors too. Like, I actually think sunflower seed butter tastes so much better than, like, I
Okay.
remember almond butter. Um,
Oh, I'm going to give that a go.
but yeah, and different brands are super different. Like, there are some sunflower seed butters I hate, and then other ones
Yeah.
that I think taste really nice. So I think trialing a
Mm.
few until you find the
I
right brand.
definitely, having gone vegan, well, I was almost vegan anyway, so I thought I might
Yeah.
as well go vegan because it's my
It's
staple for.
tough to do.
It is tough to do, but I suppose I've always cooked like this the last 4 or 5 years,
Okay.
and it was just the chicken and the fish to get rid of,
Okay.
which I wasn't that bothered about. So, and I was already dairy free and gluten free, so I don't eat
Yeah.
cheese and typical lactose milk and stuff. But I know that a lot of vegans use nutritional yeast. I don't know if you call it
Oh,
that,
yeah.
and they add it to
That's kind of tough.
everything. I see
Yeah.
it in so many recipe books, but it does. It's a lot of a problem with people with stomach issues. So
Oh,
nutritional
okay.
yeast can cause. I think people with colitis and people with Crohn's have a problem with nutritional yeast. Um,
Interesting.
my brother-in-law has an issue with it. It gives him a stomach ache, so he has to think
Okay.
other things to put in instead of nutritional yeast, which is
Yeah.
so widely used in the vegan community.
I mean, it's everywhere, and it's
Yeah,
also really high in like natural glutamate, like we were talking about. So for
yeah,
people who are sensitive to MSG, it's like,
yeah. So I got to be really careful with
yeah,
that type of thing. I mean, I have got some in stock, but I literally, if it, making gravy
little
or
pinches.
yeah, like if I'm
Yeah.
making a vegan cheese sauce or something, I'll put a little bit in because you need a bit of a
Yeah.
nicer flavor to it. But I'm going to be really careful with that. It's something
Yeah.
I'm testing out at the moment. But yeah, I
I
heard.
mean, I think that's the hardest part of that diet is like all the cheese substitutes are made
Yeah,
from either flavorings or nuts.
and
And so
soya.
like if you're sensitive, yeah, so if you're sensitive to like any of that stuff, it's so
Yeah,
hard because you
yeah.
still want those flavors. So that's where it can kind of become tricky. I love cheese, so I don't know if
You,
I could
I'm
give
not.
it up.
Yeah, I've well, I've not. When I went dairy free, and the reason why I went dairy
Yeah,
free was because of my headaches. It was better for my headaches
yeah.
not to have dairy products in there, and fluid
It's much
inflammation.
easier if you're sensitive to it. It's
Yeah,
like
isn't
caffeine. Like
it?
you don't think about it. It's not, you
Yeah,
don't miss it as much if it triggers you.
exactly. Yeah,
So
it is.
yeah.
It's like alcohol triggers me, caffeine triggers me, all these things trigger me. So I don't reach for those because they're things that I avoid.
Right.
But we're all so different, aren't we, in what triggers and what we can have in moderation, what we can have in volume and little things. And so it's trial and error, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, it really is. And a lot of it too is like what your family will eat. Like I don't think
Oh yeah.
like we
Mm,
try to at least do like a vegan recipe at least like once or twice a week just to
mm.
get in more vegetables and stuff like that.
Yeah, my
But
husband's actually really enjoying
oh,
eating.
is he? Okay.
He
I
loves,
don't think I
he
can
loves
get mine on
vegetables.
board.
He loves vegetables, and he loves he'll just add a sausage, or he'll add a burger, or
for a little
on
extra
top of what
protein.
I
Yeah.
make.
Yeah, that's smart,
It's
actually.
quite funny. It's quite funny. So just trying to have a look where I am with the questions. So we've touched
As far as the umami flavor too, there's something called coconut aminos, and I don't know if you guys can get it over there. But over here, it's not actually made from like the coconut, so it doesn't taste like coconut. It's made from the sap of a coconut blossom. So it's got kind of like a sweeter than soy sauce. It's kind of syrupy a little bit, but it's got a good depth of flavor to add instead of soy. So if you're sensitive to soy.
Yeah, because I'm a bit dodgy with soy, I have to say.
Yeah.
I've tested out tempeh and tofu and things like that, and
some of those.
I found that if I have too much of it, my headaches are not great, and so I tried to I'm not going to be having too much of that, but that's a really good thing.
That's a good sub. The only thing you have to be careful of is certain brands I find are pretty, it's lower in sodium than soy sauce, but I find some brands are still pretty high, I think, to balance out that sweetness of it. So just something to like take note of. Yeah. I also have a recipe on my website. Oh, go ahead.
There's so much research now, and you're doing research with the vegan thing, and
I
think that was one of the questions actually. Are you thinking about doing a vegan book or vegetarian book or anything sort of that way? Or
so it's kind of, I am trying to, I have a vegetarian vegan meal plan that I'm going to post within the next few weeks, so that'll be helpful for people. I will. What did you say?
As well as having a baby.
Yes. Well, so I'm scheduling these out, so there will still be content as I'm gone. But I do, I get asked for it, but then they're not my most. It's hard to keep creating them because they're definitely not my most popular recipes, even though I think they're some of my best recipes. Like one of my favorites from the cookbook and online is those Mexican stuffed sweet potatoes. Those are totally vegan. They're delicious.
That's one of my last questions is, what's your favorite recipe?
Yeah, I love that recipe. I have a sweet potato and broccoli bowl on my website that has like a tahini sauce, and that's all vegan, and that's delicious too. But as good as they are, they're just not. Everyone goes for like the pastas and stuff like that on my website, so it's hard to make vegan and vegetarian recipes the forefront. I will say, like, my book has over 70 recipes that are vegetarian, and then I'm so willing to help people like alter those to be vegan, which most of them can be done if you like switch but the butter to olive oil, or just leave out the cheese.
I mean, if I to go through your book, now I'm vegan, I'm getting sort of used to subs from cooking like this anyway for the last 4 years. There's so much that can be subbed, and actually a lot of your stuff, there's only maybe one or two things that are not vegan in some of the recipes. So it would be quite easy to do.
Even just like switching, milks or creams to like oat milk is an easy substitute that people can make.
Like the Maui kale salad.
Oh yeah, just leave out the cheese.
Yeah,
it's totally vegan.
Or if you're not sensitive to vegan cheese, pile it on. But
exactly. You could definitely do that as well. So.
There is we can get a vegan cheese in the UK, which is coconut oil based. It's like Yeah, so it's not soya based.
Okay.
Now I think it's Violife. I might be wrong.
BioLife. Yeah, I've heard BioLife is
That
probably the
that
best
I
one out
find that
there.
better than the soya ones.
Yeah.
It's interesting, just trial and error, isn't it? Just to know
Yeah.
what to
So
do.
I just tell, yeah, if people want to just contact me, I mean, obviously I can't turn water into wine, but there are some edits that you can definitely make to make things vegan, and I do try to keep it in mind, just for recipe development
Mm,
and stuff like that too. So I'll going forward, there's another one on my website too that I think people would really enjoy. It's called the cinnamon oat scones.
ooh,
And so that's a baked, so usually it's hard to find baked dishes that will fit into that vegan area, but
mm,
that's one that you can do with shortening and stuff like that. And
yeah,
those are really delicious. Yeah.
yum.
So
There's
yeah,
some
just reach
recipes.
it.
There's some recipes that I don't want to learn to do because I just eat them forever and just do these
Oh,
yummy
funny.
foods. Um,
Yeah.
I was going to say this next question is, what is your favorite? So we talked about your favorite recipe, which is the Mexican sweet potato. But what's the
Yes.
favorite, your go-to quick foods, your go-to quick recipes for someone who doesn't have the energy or not very well to do cooking for a long
To
time? Are there
cook.
any really quick recipes in your book that are,
Oh, from the cookbook?
or your
I
website?
would say, so from the cookbook, I would say probably one of the easiest you could do is that people seem to really enjoy, are either the taquitos, or which are vegan, or the enchiladas. I think Tex-Mex is like um, such a good food group for people with migraine, because it's so easy to edit. Like you could make the enchiladas easily. Oh yeah, these are the vegan taquitos. They freeze really well, so you
Oh,
can keep them
really?
on
You freeze
hand.
them? Wow.
Yeah, you just reheat them in the oven, they crisp right up. You can use an air fryer if you have an air fryer too. Um, and then the enchiladas as well in the back, for the main meals. You could also make those vegan if you wanted to, just using vegetables and no cheese, and those are delicious as well. Um, I think those that and for the people who aren't vegan, the mini meatloaves are pretty easy to pull together, and they also freeze extremely well. And
Okay.
then there's a sheet pan salmon. You don't have to make the sauce. You just put all the vegetables on a sheet pan. So there's just very minimal chopping,
Ooh.
and that, yeah, you wouldn't even need to make the sauce. Sauce takes about 5 minutes to make, but if you're exhausted or whatever, like,
So you got
oh yeah, the mini meat.
the mini meatloaves. They're cute.
Yeah.
It's
So
sweet. So
those
they're
are
like
really
little burgers,
fun.
are they?
Yeah, they're like little mini burgers, with like the tomato sauce on top. But any of those like meatballs or anything like that, they freeze extremely well.
And
Um,
with this one, obviously you use ground beef, but actually that can be veganized. And you could obviously take out the egg, and then you could put
yeah,
crushed chickpeas or something.
yeah, whatever floats your boat for it, you could definitely do.
Oh, fantastic! Makes
Um,
me feel hungry looking
it,
at it. So I think that's nearly all the questions. Actually, there's one.
okay,
Um,
these are good questions.
Yeah, they are, because they're really thought provoking, and there's some really good tips. I've learned so much that I actually didn't know.
Oh,
Um,
good.
yeah, lots of things that I didn't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure lots of people will agree that there's a lot in here that you've said that are really handy. And I think when you've got a website, we obviously know certain areas of it, but actually there's really good areas that you've put on there about McDonald's and fast food and
Yeah,
areas, you know, that.
just little posts here and there that I get asked quite a bit, like the protein powders I get asked quite a bit, and then the eating out I got asked quite a bit. So I just made them into posts because it's easiest just to link rather than trying to type it all out for people
And I
every
had
time.
this is an extra question. We've actually done all the questions now, but there was an extra question. I literally jumped on my private group just before I came live with you, and one of the members was asking about histamines, and
Oh yeah.
she was asking people if they'd been tested for histamine intolerance, and I just wondered if that's something you had a test for, or do you know people that tested?
So there's not like a specific test that you can do like just for histamine. Like a lot of people tend to draw the conclusion, I think, after doing a migraine diet. So like if they're sensitive to they'll notice they're sensitive to seafood or strawberries or spinach, and they'll start to draw a conclusion from that. So that's something, those aren't meant to be eliminated on the diet, particularly on my website, but overall, like it does exclude a lot of things that are high in histamine, like aged cheeses and stuff like that.
Right.
But at the same time, there is a testing that you can do for food sensitivities. So, I think the most popular out there is IgG, but most dietitians will tell you that they recommend MRT testing.
Okay.
And then, so this is just something you'd have to seek out from a dietitian.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like a shortcut to potentially finding triggers. Some people do it if they're not having success with an elimination diet, like the one on Dizzy Cook, or if they're just having a really hard time finding it. They'll do this MRT testing, which kind of tells you like, these are your red groups, these are your yellow groups. So you kind of have to eliminate based on that. And I think that could kind of tell you like if you could draw a connection between those items higher in histamine. And then the SIGI list is a good one to go by too.
Okay.
So I always consider like this diet to be kind of a jumping off point, and then to see what works for you, and then going from there, especially if you're not getting results.
I know, and I think, a lot of people that I speak to are kind of surprised that you go down the nutrition route. They're like, oh, didn't really sort of think about food. Oh, actually, I might explore that. But, people are so used to what they eat over the years, and then they don't really think about what they're putting into their bodies. And I'm a huge advocate for gut healing and things like leaky gut and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've got a friend actually who's used to be an Indian doctor, and she very many years ago, when I was having issues with my gut, and antibiotics had destroyed all my friendly bacteria in my gut, and I was getting all sorts of illnesses and making everything worse. And I remember her saying, you need to go on some probiotics, some strong probiotics. You need to clean your diet up and get some really good gut friendly food and colorful nutritious food. And I was like, oh yeah, whatever. And now I'm like, and now I emailed her about 2 years ago. I was like, thank God.
You were helping you feel so much better.
Yeah. And I just think that a lot of ills can be from what you're eating, and and that's why people like you is just brilliant to come up with this blueprint and guide of something that just to get people started, because a lot of people are so confused of how to start and what to do.
Especially for diets, like your neurologist hands you this paper and it's overwhelming. And I think another awful factor is like I think people start to get scared of food because they don't know what to eat, and everyone's telling them to avoid something different. And so that's not good either, because then you're not getting proper nutrition at all. So like, I'm not a dietitian. I'm just, a fun food blog to help you navigate this better. But like, for people who do need extra help, like, I highly recommend, seeing a doctor, seeing a
Yeah.
dietitian, maybe doing some of these blood tests to help you a little bit further, rather than just continuing to eliminate.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah, and then
because
eating an ice cube a day.
yeah, no, yeah, that's not good for you either.
No. And I think, there's it's an interesting journey. I mean, I'm studying computers are one of my biggest triggers. And I know that you, with the scrolling, it's one of yours as well.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this nutrition and health course for a degree online, and it's just like trying to get the time to just read through it, and then finding it hard to read through the modules, and then I've got to have a rest for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So, but I'm actually genuinely,
that's awesome though, that you're learning all that.
Interested in food, and interested in micronutrients and macronutrients, and how foods are split down, and supplements, and I mean, I'm on this one now.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Got to watch my B12. So yes, and this is another thing I eat a lot of.
Oh, flaxseed is great. Yeah,
love that on cereal.
Especially in smoothies.
Yes,
or in those balls that you're gonna make. They have the flaxseed.
Yeah, and I sprinkle it on everything actually, and I include it in everything I can do. And I got my husband onto it because it's got omega-3, because he has problems with his eyes, so he needs omega-3. So, but no, that is just so interesting. I mean, it's just amazing what you've done and what you've achieved. And
thank you.
Can't wait to follow your journey even more so. Are there any more planned? What have you got planned for this year, apart from obviously your huge
the baby.
excitement of a baby? Is there anything that you want to say? Or you can say, I should say.
There's a little discussion about book number 2, and it'll be different. It will be a little, if it works out, it would have a lot of scientific information behind it, which I think people are craving for from a migraine diet. So we'll see what happens with that. But I'm just gonna still continue. Like, I've started cooking classes, and I really love like connecting with people on there. So I think once I get back to once I have a little time off with maternity, I'm gonna keep up
give
with
yourself
those.
Your well-deserved break, I think, and be with your family once you're 3. And I suppose at some point it'd be lovely to get a kids' food ideas book.
A lot of people have said that, or like doing like cooking classes with kids.
Oh really? Wow.
I think would be really fun. So
my kids absolutely adore cooking.
They do.
Every day they do some element of cooking.
That's awesome. Are they bakers, or do they like the cooking?
They make everything. They make quiches on their own, they make lasagnas, they make shepherd's pies, they make their own breakfast. They literally make all their meals. Because I work every day, it's difficult with homeschooling to juggle it. So and actually since they were about 3, because of my vestibular migraine and all the issues, I was so ill when they were 3 and 4. I was at my illest, and I couldn't get up and cook for them, and so they had to cook their own breakfast. Felt guilty about that, but actually it's turned out to be a positive thing now, because they can cook lots of
they're like turning into their own little chefs. So
so they'll be well up for an online cooking session, and I would be up for an online cooking session next time we can do Zoom together. Let's cook.
That would be amazing. Yes, we'll have to do one of the vegan recipes.
Let's plan that when you have had your family time. and it's all very exciting. When's actually your due date?
So it's supposed to be February 12th, but we're thinking he might come early, so we'll see.
Very, very, very exciting.
Yeah. So
And
send me all your tips of how to get through these last few weeks.
Yeah, well, it's rest, lots of water, and healthy food, which you're on anyway. So and prepare.
It's so funny. You have like the VM brain too, and you mix that with pregnancy brain, and I swear, like half the time I feel like I'm losing my mind. So,
oh God,
trying to keep up with my Cognimag.
Oh, I know, I can imagine. And you got the nursery all ready?
Yeah, pretty much all done. So we just packed the hospital bags, so we're doing a few things there. So yeah,
very exciting. Well, I wish you all of the best of luck, and we'll obviously keep in contact anyway, like we always do. And I just thank you ever so much for spending time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, to answer the questions and have a chat.
It was good to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alicia.
Thank you.
Bye.